Hey folks, Alex Wiss here to talk about kind of using SAP and AI to kind of like revolutionize and reinvent supply chain planning. Just a little bit about me. I'm Alex Wiss. I've spent my entire career in data and analytics, everything from kind of traditional data warehousing to Hadoop and big data, back when we called it big data for a bit before just reverting to calling it data again. DevOps, MLOps, all those sorts of things. I am a solution architect at Lovelytics. I also lead Lovelytics Labs. Lovelytics Labs is our group that is dedicated to finding innovative ways to solve business challenges with analytics and AI. Things like how can we build engineering frameworks to accelerate engineering and data governance, data quality? How can we use AI for development, things like self-healing pipelines? And then something that we'll be talking a little bit about today, which is building reusable solutions and components that focus on our technology partners like SAP and Databricks. Our goal, our mandate is kind of like, how do we help our clients to realize value from data and analytics faster? So just a quick intro for Lovelytics. We consider ourselves an end-to-end analytics consulting firm and Databricks partner. What that means is we help our clients with everything from machine learning, AI engineering, data engineering, ingestion, data governance, analytics strategy, and then business enablement. We love Databricks because it allows us to do all of those things in a fairly seamless way, which is really great. And then something that's really important to us is something we call a business enablement, or you can call it kind of operationalizing analytics and AI, which is how do we make sure that we're actually getting value from the analytics that we're building, right? You can kind of build the best model in the world, but if it spits out a CSV or an Excel file that nobody looks at, then it actually didn't add a lot of value to the organization, right? So we want to make sure that we're focusing on how can we actually, if we're doing inventory optimization, right? How are we actually making sure we're realizing cost improvements there? If we're doing, or if we're responding to supply chain disruptions, right? How are we making sure that there's a value, right? We're increasing, or we're decreasing lost sales. We're making sure we're capturing more sales, or we're decreasing the cost lost to disruption, whether that's because of customer churn, because of lost customer satisfaction, and undelivered orders, things like that. So that's something that we're really focused on, and we'll talk about kind of throughout the discussion of the presentation. Nope. There we go. So what we're talking about today, the problem is really supply chain cost optimization, shipping cost optimization. In short, it's how do we minimize freight costs while still reaching 100% demand fulfillment, or striving for 100% fulfillment. Even if you get close, that's still pretty good. And this is a problem that I like because when we talk about that business enablement and realizing value from delivering this, a lot of the levers are already there in order to actually realize value from this as an organization, right? If you can decrease shipping cost, you can increase your revenue and increase margins, right? Kind of like right there. There's not a lot that you have to do, and your organization is probably already set up to change shipping routes, right? Change suppliers potentially, change third-party logistics providers, things like that. At the end of the day, to oversimplify, shipping optimization it's an optimization problem. It's a fairly solved optimization problem, right? You've got whether you're production or you're sourcing from suppliers, you've got things like production capacity, production cost, where are the goods being manufactured, production costs, whether those are coming from labor costs, cost of goods, et cetera, et cetera. On the right, you've got distribution. How much demand do I need in my distribution centers or my retail stores, my brick and mortar stores, whatever those are? What is the capacity? How much do I have in inventory at the moment? Where do those distribution centers live? And then in the middle, right, you've got some things around freight costs, tariff rates, et cetera, et cetera. This is again, it's a fairly solved problem. You can find solutions to kind of this optimization problem, but ultimately, in reality, it's a little bit more of a how do I minimize costs if these things happen, right? So something that's really important to us is kind of the idea of scenario planning, right? How do I, instead of just having this rote kind of optimization and plan, how can I adapt, right, when we talk about supply chain? How do I adapt if raw materials costs go up at a certain facility, or if production facility faces labor shortages, or if Everybody's favorite topic these days, tariff rates drastically increase between certain countries, right? If I'm a global organization that has, manufacturing facilities or suppliers in multiple countries, or even if I'm just sourcing materials from multiple countries, these are things that are going to affect, how you might want to optimize that, optimize your kind of shipping. So you can see you end up with this kind of like complex problem of, all right, if this happens, then here's how I should optimize my routes. And if this happens, here's how I should optimize. And so ultimately what we want to be able to do is provide something that is going to be flexible and allow supply chain planners to adapt, to understand and adapt to those changes. This might take into account things like new products and promotions, right? Like you might need to kind of do a little bit of, kind of human in the loop understanding of the problem as well. One of the ways that we can inject to help to adapt, right, and like quickly plan and understand scenarios is to use Gen AI to assist with that supply chain planning. So I like this as kind of an example of how do we introduce AI into an existing workflow. I think it provides a good example of a couple of core tenets, and we'll talk about those right as we go through it. So the high level flow is a supply chain planner kind of ideates on a scenario, whether that's, hey, tariffs might be a problem coming up soon, or I see the potential for labor shortages at this facility, right? I'm going to describe that scenario to my AI supply chain planning agent. The agent is going to kind of use probably that, what you might call like RAG or agentic workflow, kind of like gather information based on that prompt across the organization. Use that to come up with a scenario, right? So it's going to generate, okay, tariffs are increasing, I'm going to do that. I'm going to run an optimization, run that optimization model, my existing optimization model. That's going to be generated back from my planner. My planner can then choose to iterate on that scenario, maybe add additional criteria to it or just tweak things about it. And then eventually, if we want to, we can potentially push that back to something like an SAP for your ERP system for actual execution. Just highlighting a couple of things on here that I think are really important. One is, you'll notice we have what we would call like a human in the loop approach here. We've had clients kind of come up and say, well, it'd be great if we could just, can't we just build an AI agent that just kind of understands, what is going on in the world and is going to tell me how to adapt to it. And I think that's a great idea. At some point it might be there. To me, Gen AI just isn't there yet. I don't know if you've seen, but it can't even, I don't think, beat the first Pokemon game yet. So I'd be kind of hesitant to trust it to understand how like political strife in Ghana is going to affect aluminum prices or something like that. We have a human in the loop kind of coming up with those scenarios. We also have we're grounding the agent, right? We're not relying on it to use its training data set, right? We're giving it data about the organization through RAG or tool calling. And then it's going to create the scenario, and then it's actually, again, we're not asking it to kind of do any math. We're having it call an optimization function that we've already wrote that's probably using what you might call, quote unquote, like traditional methods, machine learning or just like statistical optimization, as opposed to having it try to come up with a route optimization on its own. This comes up to a challenge which is specifically around SAP. It's a system we see a lot. How do we get data out of SAP? How do we run AI and analytics on the data that it's in SAP? If you've ever used SAP or dealt with it before, it can be a little bit challenging. Everything from just trying to query the system, recommending you can't use the underlying database, trying to decipher German acronyms that kind of scatter across the tables and views. Some people are smiling in the crowd, which makes me think they've dealt with it. So it kind of becomes a little bit of a challenge, and ultimately that challenge is going to lead to your data continuing to live in disconnected systems. I've seen a lot of clients who actually just don't integrate SAP. We'll have a lot of other sources across the organization integrated into a lakehouse or a data platform, but they won't have SAP integrated, which means that your reporting is probably delayed and lagging behind your real world business, like what's going on in the real world of the organization, which means that ultimately you're making decisions that don't have the full context. Those are delayed, or maybe they're delayed, maybe they're missing key points of information. Cobbling together that information is often like a manual process. And so something that is really important to me, and I'm really excited about it, is kind of recent announcements around the SAP data sharing with Databricks. It's going to make solving problems like the one that we're going through here like really easy and straightforward. So there's a kind of seamless combination using delta sharing between SAP and Databricks now. So basically that data will just kind of, once you get it integrated, will just become available in Databricks. That really shortens the time to value on delivering on a use case like the one we're going through, because you can kind of seamlessly combine data. You can create that unified data, the data layer in Databricks, right? Unifying external data, internal data all across the organization, which is really important. And then that you can kind of like quickly utilize AI. So it's something, can we get data into Databricks and start using AI and AI agents or machine learning or just statistical analysis and reporting really fast, right? Cutting down on that time to value. We're talking weeks instead of months, which is really what we want to be about. And then if I'm operationalizing that data, right, can I push it back to SAP? If I update my plan, if I'm updating shipping routes or updating suppliers or production scheduling, things like that, right? I want to be able to push those back so they get executed. This is really important. I mean, a lot of that data is in SAP, obviously, because that is the core of your business. That is where things are getting driven from. And so being able to have that kind of bi-directional connection in a seamless way is critical to actually, going back to what I talked about earlier, operationalizing analytics for the organization. How do we make sure that when we build these models, right, the business is going to realize the value from them because they're actually going to use them? So a high-level architecture for how we can enable a solution like this. On the left, you'll see kind of your SAP data. Those are your SAP modules, things like finance controlling, production planning, obviously materials management, sales and distribution are kind of the SAP modules that are going to go into a planning solution like this. Up at the top, we're combining things like external data. I mentioned tariffs earlier. You might be probably sourcing those from some sort of, maybe the World Trade Organization or another source. You might also think about things like extreme weather events, right? How can I potentially route around extreme weather events that could take down portions of the supply chain? Or the global newsfeed, things like the Panama Canal, right? Really important. How can I kind of, that was a few years ago, right? Shut down for a while. How do we make sure that we're incorporating things like that and using those to play in this to play into these scenarios? Then we've got kind of that delta sharing connection that's going to make that available, which is great. We're going to merge all of that into our lakehouse, provide that kind of like single source of truth for data across the organization. Demand forecast is really key there, right? We kind of talked about the demand side. How much do I need of things in every place? And then we've got our existing optimization model, our supply chain planning app, and our Gen AI model serving endpoint. That's going to be our actual LLM. And on the right, we've got our supply chain planners that are interacting with that app. In this particular case, and we've delivered this in ways that we keep as much of that as possible on Databricks, which again is why we love the platform. So we can run our demand forecasting right there in Databricks. We've got our optimization model is running there. We've got our supply chain planning app. We can run in Databricks apps, right? Seamless integration. Our model serving, our LLM model serving endpoints are there, so we can, if we need to, probably use just a state-of-the-art model like Claude, or we can, if we need to, potentially fine-tune a model or provide our own open source models as well. So a lot of options as far as the architecture and how we enable it. So just going through kind of like a high-level scenario here, just a little app that we've built to help kind of visualize the problem, right, and understand the solution. And we'll kind of solve this problem in two ways, right? Like we'll see how you can do it kind of without Gen AI and then utilizing Gen AI and talk about maybe the benefits of that. So in this particular case, right, you can see my shipping routes, and then I can kind of go in and I can update the tariffs. So I highlighted I'm updating tariffs for 2.5% to 5.5% on one of my suppliers, one of my facilities. I don't know why we picked decimals when we put this demo together. I don't think they're usually in decimals, but such is life. And you can kind of see, I've got my map that is updating my shipping routes or my routes, the amount of goods that I'm shipping on each of them. I can dig in and I can see exactly what did I change here. Did I change? Nope, one too many. Right, I can look at the existing routes. It's kind of, for a small example like this, you could see it's easy to understand, but for a larger example, when I have a whole bunch of routes, a whole bunch of suppliers, it would be a little bit more cumbersome in order to understand exactly what changed, like what are the what's significant about what's changed. And then, especially as you think about, I've just updated kind of a single lever, but ultimately there's a whole bunch of levers, going back to the original problem. There's production costs, labor availability, labor cost, availability of shipping and transportation, weather. So there's all these levers and knobs, and so For a simple problem, it might be easy to just kind of go manually update things, but for a more complicated problem, we might actually want to use an interface that is going to provide us a more dynamic way to create these scenarios, right? So what I really like about the opportunity to use Gen AI in this situation is the conversational ability to really expose this capability to a different type of persona than previously had been able to do it. I think you see these kind of use cases all across just the data and analytics, but just kind of like UI UX in general, which is how do we enable people that previously maybe couldn't do this sort of work to interact with data and to generate insights in a new way, which is really great. So instead of having to go in and just update my lever, right, can I just say, hey, I'm concerned about a 10% tariff in Germany, let's create a new shipping plan, right? That's essentially creating my new scenario. And what it's going to do, again, behind the scenes is it's not going to, it's going to essentially update the inputs to my optimization problem. It's going to update the tariff rates, and it's going to rerun my optimization function. So kind of that agentic tool calling style flow where it's going to gather information, it's going to maybe update some information, and then it's going to execute another model that I have a lot more trust in when it comes to things like math and reason, or not reasoning, but actually like doing calculations, right? So I can see, right, simple example, but my agent is going to respond, right, understands my concern. It's going to identify, I said Germany, but it's actually going to understand because it's able to query, like what are my production facilities, it knows those. It's going to say, okay, like I understand that you're going to affect Berlin Precision, which is my supplier, maybe my production facility in Germany. Based on that analysis, right, it's going to give me a summary. So it's this really nice, like at a glance view of, okay, well, we're adding a new route, that's great. We're increasing and reducing shipments from a couple of places. And here's the overall impact, right? Like that's an overall 7.3% decrease. And then it's going to highlight those on the map if I do want to kind of like dig into specific portions. So ultimately what something like this is going to do is it's going to allow supply chain planners, right, to more like rapidly iterate on these sorts of solutions. And if you can iterate on those sorts of solutions and understand proactively the problems that you might face based on your knowledge of your organization and the world at large and the problem at large, you can much better plan for those different scenarios, right? So we talked about that optimization problem, tariffs again being kind of a hot topic. We had a lot of clients that over the course of November, December, January, February even were stocking up on inventory, right? Because they were running these sort of scenarios and understanding, okay, if tariffs do increase, right, that's going to increase the cost of goods. I want to stock up. I'm going to take the extra hit on inventory now, right? So the optimization model probably would have told you not to do that. But if you kind of optimize based on a scenario, then you can understand and kind of hedge against the what's going to happen in those scenarios. So something like this allows you to really rapidly iterate, right? Which allows you to ultimately be a lot more nimble and a lot more reactive to your organization and things that happen. Again, I really like this use case because it's an example of how do we enhance an existing workflow, right, and allow an existing workflow to really be more agile using generative AI as opposed to, hey, how do I completely replace a process or try to replace people with generative AI? I think this provides a really good kind of idea of what what the possibilities are around this sort of interaction and this sort of technology. In this particular solution, right, just highlighting three things that we really talk about a lot when we talk about generative AI and how to make the best use of it is, we keep a human in the loop, right? There's a supply chain planner is kind of ideating these scenarios, workshopping them with the AI, and utilizing the AI to kind of like rapidly enable and understand them. We're grounding the AI agent, right? We're not relying on that corpus of training data for it to understand our organization or to potentially hallucinate. We're having it query inventory, we're having it query production facilities, labor costs, based on that SAP integration, right, which is really great. And then we're combining not only generative AI, but also ML and statistical components, right? So we're using tools for what they're good at. Again, I don't want Gen AI doing math, typically. So I'm using kind of those statistical calculations, and that may even be a process that currently exists within an organization, right, is that optimization model. And so you can kind of integrate that with an existing process, which is really great. Cool. Thanks for coming. Lovelytics, we have a booth right down the road, 323. You can come talk to me. I'll be here the rest of the day and tomorrow. Appreciate you guys coming out.